There he is. Fantastic.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. So welcome to this edition of Roaring Fork Leadership's Resiliency Experience. We started doing these in May, every Tuesday from noon to 1, and we've had a nice variation of speakers that have provided their wisdoms and insights as it relates to the resiliency topic, supporting our community and individuals just to cope through COVID-19 and honestly just having coping skills in life. So one of the things with Evan being here was just knowing that there is, call it, vulnerable populations and how do they cope. So Evan Zislis, our speaker today, is with the Aspen Institute. He recently got a position under the Hurst Community Initiative through the Aspen Institute to literally look at our community with research that he's going to share with you that exists already and really identify some of these key areas that need support and assistance and help, and a lot of synergy between what the Aspen Institute does, especially in this capacity, and RFL. Even within our academy program, we work on civic projects. So we take these ideas, working with organizations, and really help flush out the ideas and create change in our community. So Evan will share a little bit more about that, even being an alumni of RFL, and he's got a plethora of background. He's an author of Clutter-Free Revolution. He's was one of the co-founders with CoVenture, and we have Michael Lowe on the call with us today as well. And beyond that, he's just a wealth of knowledge, and I am really pleased and excited for him to bring a conversation. Today's really going to be more about dialogue. We want to hear from you that would really support the efforts that Evan and I, through RFL, both are looking at our futures.
Check that it's the first.
So, Evan, is there anything else that you can think of that I should share before we get started?
Any?
Sure, let's do some housekeeping stuff first. I would just love to ask everyone to put themselves on mute. And if at all possible, to take yourself off, turn on your videos. I want to see everyone that is willing to be seen. This is, as Andrea mentioned, this is going to be more of a conversation than a presentation. I'm much more interested in hearing from all of you. I wouldn't say that this is going to be as informative as it will be information gathering. So I'm so grateful to see so many people from our community in positions of leadership and influence. The work that you are already doing is really going to inform a lot of the work that I hope to be doing here in the near future. Let me just back up a little bit. My name is Evan Zislis. I've been in the Valley for about 20 years. I moved here in 1999 to teach 7th grade social studies at Aspen Middle School. I fell into the Aspen Valley nonprofit scene and have worked with a variety of nonprofits of the Aspen Valley, Aspen to Glenwood Springs. In 2012, I started my own consulting firm that was focused on organization and operations. And in March of this year, right about the same time that everybody was kind of coming to a screeching halt, my business did the exact same thing. And I was very grateful and fortunate when the Aspen Institute asked me to interview for a position, a brand new position that is generously being funded by Bob and Soledad Hurst up in Aspen. The Hurst Community Initiative is intended to promote dialogue, increase understanding, and facilitate opportunities for meaningful collaboration across elected officials, nonprofit organizations, school districts, interagency task forces across Pitkin, Eagle, and Garfield counties. So for those of you who don't know about the Aspen Institute, I'll share this with you just briefly. The Aspen Institute drives change through dialogue, leadership, and action to help solve the greatest challenges of our time. Can everybody see that? So I just want to introduce you to this website. Working at the Aspen Institute for the last, I'm at the beginning of my 8th week, so I'm brand new to the organization. It is probably one of the most humbling experiences of my life to join such an incredible organization. It's like joining the faculty of a university, but not just any university, a university with global reach, with global influence, that is dedicated to solving or helping to solve the defining challenges of our time. And if you have access to a computer, either as we're talking or after we're finished with this conversation, I cannot recommend strongly enough that you browse this website yourself. As you can see across the top, it's divided by subject. There's over 70 different program departments, each with their own executive director, each with their own team, with their own newsletters and social media presences. Many of them have their own websites. It is such a robust platform, and everything that everyone is working on all the time is for us. It's designed for communities to immerse themselves in and saturate all of this data and research and public policy so that we can assimilate all of that information into our own work, into our own lives, in our own communities. And boy, I tell you what, each little section, business and society, communications and culture, education, environment, and energy, public health, going across, every little thing is a wormhole. And you will find videos of old webinars. You'll find blog posts, podcasts. We're going to come back to a couple of things that I want people to be aware of and see a little bit later. But I just wanted you to be aware that this website is such a resource, especially with the Aspen Ideas Festival, their physical presence being going to virtual platform this year for the first time. They're making the Aspen Ideas Festival a virtual experience available to anyone with an internet connection, absolutely free. So you'll have opportunity to engage in those conversations, and that all starts this week. So please do sign up and register for all of the different areas of interest. Rob Stein, I would love to see you more connected with some of the things that are going on in education. I'm going to circle back with you on some of those things as invitations just came up yesterday for the superintendents of the Roaring Fork Valley. So that's just one example. So I'll stop sharing that. So hopefully everyone puts their viewing on the gallery view so that everybody can see everybody's face. As anybody that's willing to jump off of to jump onto their video so that we can all see each other, that'd be great. Just do put yourself on mute unless you feel like you want to share something. I'll say this: the Hurst Community Initiative is intended to focus in 3 primary areas. The first one is that I am intended to be a conduit for the entirety of the Aspen Institute's global programming to the communities Aspen to Parachute. So the Roaring Fork Valley all the way to Western Garfield County. So that's my job, is to deliver all of the content, or as much of it as I can get my arms around, to the communities of the Roaring Fork Valley and Western Garfield County, and vice versa. I want to try to put the amazing things that are happening in our community in front of the people that are at the Aspen Institute. I should say that the Aspen Institute is about 500 people. Most of them, the vast majority, are spread out between New York City and our headquarters in Washington, D.C. So they comprise of people with research backgrounds, education backgrounds, post-secondary education backgrounds, public policy. Many of them are former cabinet members of past presidential administrations. Many of them have worked under Obama and previous presidential administrations, And these are folks that are spread out around the country and the world in their influence and how they administer their research and programming. So our reach is so big. What I want to try to do is get some of what's happening here locally in the Roaring Fork Valley in front of those folks so that we can use what's happening here in the Valley as a case study for a national conversation. And I'll give you one example of that. I reached out to Vice President and Executive Director of the Latinos in Society Department at the Aspen Institute based out of DC. And I asked them if they would be willing to host Beatriz Soto with Wilderness Workshop and Alex Sanchez with Voces Unidas de las Montañas to feature them as a case study about what is going on among the Latino communities of the Roaring Fork Valley as part of what is going on in rural America among Latinos, by Latinos, for Latinos. And so that is going to be a featured webinar presentation on August 13th that is going to be facilitated by the directors of the Latinos in Society program in DC. So we're very excited to be putting as much of what's going on locally, because I think we are doing some amazing things locally, both in our school districts, in our community organizing, through Mountain Voices projects, just to name a couple. So what I would love to do is start my tenure at the Aspen Institute with what people are calling a listening tour. It's an opportunity for me to come to the community and ask you, what do you think are the priorities that we should be focused on? Who are the communities that are historically underrepresented or underserved that need to be at the table, that need to be at a part of the conversation in creating solutions that they will ultimately benefit from? So the Hurst Community Initiative is really hyper-focused on those hardest hit by the defining challenges of our time, right? So what I would love to do is start to engage with you guys and tap into your experience and your wisdom and your work to hear specifically where you think we ought to focus this conversation and future conversations, because what you tell me, I will be bringing to my team, and those will be the programs that are focused on in the months and years ahead. That said, we sent out, as part of the registration for this, a series of questions. I don't know if everyone has access to those questions. I can read them again. Actually, what I'll do is I'll share my screen.
I can copy and paste them into the chat.
That'd be great. The first one is, and I just want to kind of do a round table on this. I'll ask a question, and anybody that wants to speak, just unmute yourself. I'll ask that we're all just very respectful of each other. I'll ask that you try to keep your comments as lean as you can so that we all have an opportunity to weigh in. We've got about 45 minutes left of this, so I want to make sure that we get to everything and everyone. The first question is, how do you define vulnerable populations in the era of COVID-19? And I'll just open that up, and we can start from there.
So you can either unmute or raise your hand, and I'll just kind of watch and call on you.
I think everybody shows up in one screen, so we're not on multiple screens.
Correct.
So who are these folks that are hardest hit from your perspective?
Thanks. Hi, Evan. Hey, everybody. Carrie Ann, nice to see you all. It seems pretty clear that the Black population is dying at an exponential rate and doesn't have the resources to combat COVID as the white population does at this time.
So, okay, so according to the CDC, people of color have been disproportionately hit hardest, both economically and from a public health perspective, for a wide variety of reasons. I would love to hear from you all what else you have to weigh in on that particular subject.
Sumner, can I pick on you? I know I appreciated you doing some pre-work in an email, which is awesome.
Well, I responded to Andrea's request with a variety of what I think were vulnerable, including economically and educationally, but back to the people of color and those who are economically stressed. I know in this valley, just from personal experience from my Latinx friends, in this valley, they are underserved medically. They have fewer medical connections as well as the information that so many of us are dealing with. And there's still a great deal of reservation and fear to either seek help or come out, whether documented or undocumented. So that's clearly going on in our valley here. I don't know that we're getting accurate counts regarding actual infections in our valley. That I can't ascertain, but I know I suspect some of those numbers are being suppressed within our Latinx population. That's one group I identified. I'll wait, Andrea, for some of the others since we're on this now. Yeah.
Thanks.
I would love to pick on Sydney and Rob a bit too, and Mike Lowe as well.
Yeah, I was just hitting unmute. Thanks, Evan. So I'm Sydney Shallett, and I'm with Manaus, and we define the vulnerable populations, especially locally, as those essentially who were, without warning or any merit, forced into economic disaster and sort of exceptional health risk due to the pandemic. And a lot of that leads back to what, I lost her name. Who spoke earlier? Sorry, to Sumner and
Ariane.
sorry, thank you. To what they said about it definitely impacts a lot of our Latino community. I mean, all of it actually, but also I think a significant impact that is felt is in our elderly population, and especially those who are still being forced to, or I guess forced isn't the right word, but highly encouraged to stay as solitary as possible.
Rob, can I pick on you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say first of all that I'm Rob Stein of the Rhineford School. We haven't really put effort into the conversation of defining vulnerable populations, but we've spent a lot of effort since the crisis started, and in a different way since the crisis, to identify and meet needs. And so I guess I could say where great needs are presenting. When the shutdowns began, we took a couple weeks to get organized, but then when we started to re-engage our families and students after what would have been spring break, we called every family with a wellness check, and we called every student, their teacher called it, to just ascertain their needs. And so what people are saying in our community is the Latino community is experiencing much more hardship than the Anglo community. People who are in more working class jobs are experiencing more hardship. And though our children are not as vulnerable to the disease itself, the burdens on them have been greater, not only for the lack of social interaction and educational opportunity, but our older students, many of their parents are out of work, and so our students who work in minimum wage jobs are finding that they're the income earners for their families. Another aspect of this is really documentation, and it's been very interesting. I've looked at this question of how many documented, undocumented immigrants there are in the valley, in the Aspen and Parachute Range, and the guesstimate is about 5,000 people. The three counties that the valley, that touch the valley, have very different approaches to serving the undocumented. Pitkin County treated it like another disaster and didn't, they administered aid as needed to people in need. Garfield County wanted to see documentation status as a condition for receiving aid. And so depending on where you lived or what resources you were trying to draw upon, if you were undocumented, you had more or less aid available to you. And then the final thing I'll add to that equation is that our children are hit especially hard because the vast majority of the children in the valley are documented, but those who have undocumented parents are living in sort of a shadow world where they're not accessing services to which as U.S. citizens they're entitled, whether that's healthcare, food assistance, housing assistance, economic assistance, because of either the fear or the fact that their parents can't legally get that assistance because of some of our counties and our state and our federal government's restrictions. So those are, those families are obviously the most vulnerable.
Kelly Collier is the deputy county manager for Eagle County. Knowing just that's kind of, I'm just thinking of the recent article that came out with some kids at the Basalt in sports, right, getting ready for sports athletics, and a few kids had COVID, and this is kind of that younger population. But Kelly, it'd be great to hear from the Eagle County perspective. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, Rob hit on a lot of the points that I had noted down. But everything that we as a community had struggled with prior to COVID, with access to housing, affordability, supporting our workforce, access to childcare, access to medical care, has just been incredibly exacerbated because of COVID. So really, food insecurity came to mind first and foremost. If you can't put food on the table, you can't pay rent, you can't send your kids to childcare, you can't go to work. We really are looking at ways to be able to solve some of these major issues that have been longtime issues. In looking at the support for the community, the county, Eagle County, has looked at ways to provide we've done emergency assistance, but which is direct to landlords and food carts to community members, but looking at ways to also support the variety of nonprofits that we have throughout the mountain region, so that the nonprofits can do what they do best, whether it be food or rent assistance. And so when Evan was talking earlier about the people that should be at the table having the conversation, we are so fortunate to have so many nonprofits doing such great work throughout the mountain region, that was the first thing that came to mind, with the variety of different supports for community members. And Andrea, to talk about the data has come up a couple of times already, and that's something that we're actively working on. First and foremost, how do we collect data through the region, the 3-county area? How is the data collected? How is the contact tracing accomplished and the success of the contact tracing? But really, it all comes down to how do we protect and provide the most safe environment for our community, and what are we going to do with that data? So we have to be very thoughtful about how we collect the data, how accurate is the data, and then what we do with that data as well. So that's something that we're actively working on, and we hope Summit County has provided some good examples, but also have had some lessons learned from data being provided on how COVID, how it impacts specific populations or areas or municipalities. And so we're actively working on how we can do that in the most effective manner.
Can I pick on Mike? Mike, can you weigh in on some of the economic resilience and some of the business development stuff that you've been working on, in terms of who is now identifying as what we might consider vulnerable or most at need? Mike Lowe, are you there?
If you are, you're on mute if he's here.
We can circle back with Mike. Hopefully he'll show up.
Ted has something. Ted?
Oh, sorry, great. Please go ahead.
I have one additional group that I thought about, particularly watching the news this morning, as I was seeing the group that had gathered 7 hours in anticipation of Trump showing up to address the congregation in Phoenix this morning. And that's the group, and I don't know how well they're known or identifiable, but they are, of deniers, of the folks who don't believe that there's any problem anywhere, whether you're talking about COVID or climate or whatever the crisis potentially might be, but vulnerable not only from their own perspective, but also have the greatest potential of causing damage and injury to the rest of the community by their denying. And I think there needs to be a way to figure out how to get them to participate in the conversation and to employ some critical thinking skills that many of them seem to, they don't exhibit very well.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. They probably have that same perspective of anybody who's for it, right? Of that group who thinks it is something. Mike's back. You're on mute. There. Yay.
I guess, we've of Afro Americans in the Valley, and we're in conversation with those 12 about how we can support them. But for the most part, we're just trying to lean in and support our Latino community. We've already got a program.
Mike, your video is pretty slow. You're kind of cutting out.
Program participation, and I think, yeah, we're having internet issues at CoVenture today. So I guess we're primarily trying to serve the Latino community. And
Okay.
We're doing that through the Latino Chamber of Commerce and through Barbara Freeman's La Medici program, which now has received over $2 million. That's been distributed to, I want to say 512 Latinos at last count for a basic savings plan. And we're in the process of offering financial literacy programs. First one we did was a month ago in Silt, 36 women that have just kind of come together organically to support each other. And we've offered, our bookkeeper has been fantastic and sort of working with us and with Barbara to sort of program, encouraging these women and their families to save. And, it's baby steps right now. And I think working with not just the Latino Chamber, but also Alex Sanchez, who you mentioned earlier, has been, I think, a good way of trying to understand, kind of shout out to the Roaring Fork School District and really all the schools, and strategic about how they serve their Latino students. So, and the Colorado Rocky Mountain BOCES has done a really good job of sort of working with that. And I think in many ways, like Yampa Mountain High School is a good example how serving vulnerable populations is often an economic question. So you take a school like Yampa Mountain High School, which has, I want to say 42% Latino population, but 88% of those students are on free and reduced lunch, which is the primary marker for poverty. And a lot of those kids and their families are really struggling right now. Yes, they're taking advantage of lift up services, but we've been coordinating with a number of organizations to provide a meal train to those families. And, I think we try to step in when the opportunity is there. But, I think there's still a huge learning curve on how we can better serve communities of color.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Don't go anywhere. Stick around. Sumner has his hand raised. Go ahead, Sumner.
Thank you. I just wanted to, as I thought about this when Andrea sent the questions, broaden this out one step broader. And it's not just our valley, but our valley is so dependent on service and labor workers, whether they're of color or not. So I think it's even broader than just the Latin population. It's our waiters, it's our service workers, it's our landscapers, all of whom are working at below subsistence wages for this valley, most of them working without medical benefits, and a lot of them not facing a lack of reemployment, depending on what happens with the economy. But there's also a subtle thing I think that's happening because of the stay-at-home, and now things are opening up in the valley, which I happen to personally think we face considerable danger. The very workers that have the least amount of pressure, are least amount of protection, are feeling the greatest pressure to go work. Many of which are working under conditions without adequate protection, and that covers the whole broad range of people we depend on in the valley, Latino and Anglo, and maybe this is an opportunity for some cohesiveness in there because it is a shared problem. And I just wanted to mention that as well.
I think that we've had, thank you, Sumner. I think that we've had a lot of identifying who is hardest hit. I wonder if we can pinpoint critical priorities. I think that we've already done a little bit of that. The following question, which I think is sort of tied to what we've already been discussing, is the primary stakeholders you think ought to have a voice in the process that may not historically have had a voice in creating these solutions. I wonder if I could just throw out to folks, who do you think needs to be part of the conversation that hasn't been already, and what steps are being taken to enroll people in the process of creating those solutions?
Yep. If you have, and I will throw this out there, of course, by all means, speak up. I think that's what Evan's asking, but in the chat, because I mean, we'll save the chat as well, so we can go back and get those names, and Evan and or I for RFL Civic Projects and what Evan's up to, we can reach out to those folks too. So in the chat, you please share those names or raise your hand if you know of somebody who hasn't come to the table yet that should be.
So what is not already being done to, or what is being done that we can celebrate or double down on in order to bring correct the stakeholders to the conversation?
I'll throw out there, Sumner and I had a great conversation, I think it was early last week or maybe the end of the week prior, and it was literally, it's like thinking of all these similar types of nonprofits that are kind of after doing the same thing. I think of even how you define what Aspen Institute does, Evan, and I know what CoVenture does, and Roaring Fork Leadership, and Imagine Glenwood, and Community Builders. And I think of the word, collaboration or ecosystem, and getting more of those organizations talking. And Evan, I know that's a big piece of what what you're behind. But it's like taking the steps to do that, I think could get, even Sydney, I think of what you're doing and supporting, Latinos right now, even holistically of what Manaus stands for, or Valley Settlement for that matter, and just get us all and saying who's doing what and how can we help each other could be a great dialogue, or to kind of your point, Evan, identify some of those, if people are stepping on toes, maybe not intentionally, that if they actually worked together, more could be accomplished, would be an idea behind that.
Sydney, I wonder if you could share a bit more about how you're bringing people together through Manaus and La Medici and Mountain Voices.
So at Manaus, in response to the crisis, we set up an emergency fund. Through that fund, we've supported over 1,000 immigrant families in the Valley, from Battlement Mesa over to, I think, like Avon is as far as our furthest family east, and then up into Aspen as well. Through that process, we distribute $950 in emergency cash assistance, and then $50 gets deposited into a savings account on the La Medici app. And in that work, we've had a lot of success with partnerships. We've partnered with Valley Settlement, and they've been huge donors, and supporters. They also have a person on staff who's helping with the intake process. We also have partnered with Aspen Community Foundation in significant ways. They've helped us a lot with some data work, and obviously financially, they've been huge contributors. And then also the Colorado Trust has been a significant donor, and they also helped us do a lot of outreach out towards Battlement Mesa and Parachute, which was wonderful. Through Mountain Voices Project, which is a really different project, there's been a lot of outreach and support, but none of it is actually like service oriented. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in doing some community organizing work to get involved with Mountain Voices, and I'd be happy to connect anyone to the project lead there, because she's always really fun to talk to, but also welcoming for people to join meetings. And as far as the process goes for more collaborations, I think that the issue that we focused on was, you know, so many people in the Valley were going to receive stimulus checks, and those who were not were the ones that we focused on. And so that's sort of a roundabout way of saying that we tried to target our aid and emergency cash assistance towards our undocumented immigrant neighbors. And so we're really proud of that fact, and it's not necessarily a normal thing that we work in. And so we are really happy to have done the work we've done, and we still have quite a bit to do, but we're doing it in a little bit of a different way this week. Actually, La Medici became sort of a conduit maybe for the Left Behind Workers Fund, which is a fund of a little over 4 million out of Denver, and they really wanted to reach this corridor, and so we are helping get their money out, and so it'll be a different process, and it won't be branded with La Medici, but that's another organization that we're really excited to be working with through La Medici in particular.
I wonder, can I circle back with Rob? I would love to hear, because you have such a broad reach. You're in 2 counties, right? I wonder if you can just share a little bit about how you're supporting families across such. You got a big reach. Tell us what you're working on. How are you bringing direct service to those that you're identifying as most in need?
Well, I mean, just to touch on that, we actually serve 3 and almost 4 because Gunnison spills over into Gunnison, who spill down to Carbondale to go to high school. But one of the complexities is there's different municipalities in different counties that all do things differently, and so just navigating that jurisdictional complexity has been really, it's always hard for us, and it's been even harder in this time, like getting permission to hold a program when you have to get 3 counties to give you approval, and they all have different ways of monitoring safety and approving safety guidelines. But I would say where this conversation was going is very much the direction that I've been pleased about, that organizations are starting to coalesce and coordinate and communicate more than ever before. And this really gets to the silver lining question at the end of the list of questions. I hope that's a lasting effect, that there's more taking and looking back at where the needs are, and then who can do what to help address the needs, and sharing information, being less positional about your institutional identity, and more like looking at like how do we pivot in this moment. And I'll say, as a school district, we've not only had to pivot, we've had to expand. And so things we do in order to enable school to happen, some limited family services, some food services, some transportation services, all those things have now become major community resources. We're operating a transportation system for delivering meals to 2,000 kids a day. And then on Fridays, we're partnering with other nonprofits to deliver meals to last the weekend. And so where we just see, that we're not even offering transportation to our kids right now, it's all meal delivery. Similarly, our food service, I think we've actually increased our meal service. I think that 2,000 meals per day is higher than our typical daily average. I might be wrong about that, but we've at least pretty much maintained about the same scale. And then in our family services department, like La Medici has never before administered the kind of cash assistance. So we've been doling out, I think, $700,000 or $800,000 of cash assistance, and we've served as a conduit in coordination with these other larger partners like La Medici, so that families go, we've created more of a no wrong door. No matter, you know, if you come to us, this is what we can do for you. If you go to La Medici, if we don't have available assistance, we send you to La Medici. So that coordinated effort, all centered around the identified needs, has been, I think, pretty inspiring. Also frustrating because the needs are so much greater than the resources. But you know, it's been very interesting. And we have this side business where we're delivering educational services right now, and we're going to have to get back into that full time at some point. And then I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'll tell you one small challenge that's actually significant is we've identified funding through July 24 for meal deliveries, but we need some time to retool before we start at the school year. You know, it's a pretty intense regulatory environment, federal food guidelines. So we have to train our staff, we have to clean our equipment, we have to service our buses. And so after July 24 until school starts, I think August, I'm going to say 17, sometime in that range, we can't deliver meals anymore. And right now there's going to be that gap unless we find community partners to step in to help with that. And so our system isn't perfect, you know. I don't, you know, so I'm hoping that the community continues to build momentum and respond in the ways that it has.
What I am learning is that I don't have to talk in between everything. Does anybody else have something else that they want to share?
Yeah, I would, if I may, Evan. Am I muted?
No, you're go ahead. Brian, you looked like you had something you wanted to share.
It was back when we were talking about, no worries. When we were talking about the vulnerable populations, as it were, I think one of the issues that we found, especially as things started to first roll out, was that there wasn't that much connection or direct or a point to organization or nonprofit or government agency or something like that that had that connection with the Latino community at large. And so I think that was a lot of what gave rise to a lot of the issues that we saw, is that we didn't have the direct access to kind of say, as a lot of different resources were coming up, we didn't have that direct access to that community to let them know what was available for them. I think since then we've done a lot of development and really understanding that gap and trying to develop different ways to address that gap and to reach out to the community. And so I know that the nonprofits, especially like La Medici and Manaus and Valley Settlement, have really kind of expanded who they're reaching out to, how they're reaching out to people, and also with Voces Unidas, with Alex Sanchez, that's what we were talking about earlier too, really trying to fill that gap and try to really establish some organizations or an organization that really has that kind of trusted feeling with that community and that can help send out information to as many people as possible, as effectively as possible, in a way that isn't just through like a newsletter and stuff like that, but kind of using like Facebook and different and like text messages and such that are kind of non-traditional, but that still have a good amount of reach within these communities.
Sumner and then Carrie Ann.
Well, if I may, I think, you know, a lot of my effort has been a little bit very localized here in Glenwood, but my exposure is a little broader in the Valley. But I've had a chat with the Chamber. I had a brief chat with Andrea. One thing, and this is a great example, this mosaic right in front of me right now, everything that, all the organizations that Sydney listed, all the multifaceted things that Rob is dealing with, what Brian just said about the growth of different outreach and trusted organizations. It seems to me, in this extremely giving Valley, what we seem to be, what at least I've missed, and maybe it's out there, is some kind of overview that connects all these silos. Who is doing what for whom in the various communities? And there's no, that I know of, there's no resource that diagrams that. I think it would be extremely helpful to see in this Valley what the organizations are. I don't know if you head it by, it could be service, funding, strategy, education, distribution, health, but, and whether somebody does it as capstone projects or CMC tackles it or somebody, that to me, and this is a great example of what you're doing here today, of a coordinated piece of information that we seem to be missing in the Valley to diagram and visualize that the overlap or duplicated or resources to piggyback off. And I don't know how we get that, but I think it's missing.
Can I speak to that really quickly? So I put 2 links in the chat. The first one is the English version and the second one is the Spanish version. And so this was a project that ACF developed in kind of the earlier stages about in March or so. And what it really was our attempt to do just that, to kind of figure out who was offering what for whom, and what type of resources were available. So this is kind of a way to put that in a comprehensive way for people and organizations to look through and see what resources are available. It's been a little bit since we've revisited it, so some of the information might be a little outdated, but if you see anything like that that you know needs to be updated, just feel free to let me know. I'll put my email in the chat too.
Just to add
And Brian, that's great. I'm going to take a look at that, but I'm even thinking broader than just COVID too. I mean, hopefully one day this will pass, but it's also illuminated tons of other issues that we have on an ongoing basis. So I'd like to see some kind of resource like that expanded more broadly even than COVID. Thank you for those links. Thank you for those links.
Also, the Aspen Community Foundation weekly, I'm not on those calls, but the organizations are actually coordinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in if that's okay, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
There are weekly COVID response calls, and to your point, Sumner, I agree that it should be beyond COVID, but for right now, ACF is hosting these weekly calls, and then I think every couple of weeks, those who received the 2020 emergency relief funding via ACF also have like a separate call, but those have been hugely helpful. And I think one thing I'd like to note too is that all the family resource centers from Roaring Fork and Aspen are on those calls, and I just know how hard those guys are working to help coordinate with families. And of course, people who have access to that are people with children, and so there's obviously more need beyond that. But those calls have been really helpful, and it'd be really interesting to see how they could evolve past COVID and into the permanent recovery effort that's going to be, I mean, in my mind, pretty permanent.
Does anyone else have anything to add on that particular point, or
Yeah.
carry on?
I'll be quick. I'm just wondering in a big picture level, and Sydney and Sumner were just speaking to it beyond COVID. We have a tremendous valley that has a lot of people that want to do a lot of things and lots of help. And I believe we've covered a lot of territory here today. And it seems like many, if not all of those things are kind of downstream. They're addressing immediate needs and immediate problems. And I'm wondering about going further upstream and how we can, as a collective, there needs to be a collective, and maybe that's who you are and what you're doing, Evan, and congratulations on your new job. You're going to do amazing things. But solving the problems at the source. And and also we're in, and this is just a wonder for me, so maybe we can wonder on this more once we get off the call, about, we have this beautiful little bubble up here, and there are certainly issues to address, but I wonder about how we can be more connected, and maybe that's through Aspen Institute, maybe that's for you, with the rest of the world and the rest of the state and the rest of the West and the country on all of these initiatives. Because I feel like we kind of forget that we have the potential for great impact up here and beyond our valley. So thank you. That was my wonder.
I'll just say, what a great segue. The heart of the Hurst Community Initiative, which I was hired to develop and launch and direct, is exactly what you're describing. The proposal that is now underway is a leadership proposal designed for 2 groups of people. The first one is elected officials, Aspen to Parachute. The second group is non-elected community leaders. So what the plan is, what the proposal says, is that we're going to recruit from our community who are those that need to be at the table, talking about the issues that you are all describing, and how can we get each other even more involved with each other's work in ways that share resources, in ways that leverage and double down on initiatives already underway. We are approaching this work with the utmost humility for the work. We're standing on the shoulders of those that have been doing this work for a long, long time. And all we want to do is help. And so by bringing people together and hopefully getting them out of whatever silos they may be in, or across municipalities and counties, to Rob's earlier point, how can we make sure that we are working together? The proposal states that both groups will be on individual tracks simultaneously every year, and that they'll converge several times to make sure that we are aware of and enabling each other's efforts and supporting each other's efforts. So that proposal has gone to, and I'm going to share my screen here with you. Okay, so the Community Strategies Group at the Aspen Institute, which is based out of Washington, D.C., they have a department. Well, the Community Strategies Group is the department. Their focus is on building better fundamentals for rural progress, and they have done a ton of research. They've collected a ton of data. Most recently, they've been working with 365 different nonprofit organizations across 44 states in order to collect data about what is going on in rural America right now. I've put links to a couple of different things in the chat room. So before you leave this meeting, please make sure that you copy and paste the early links high up in the chat so that you can get access to this. And it's also on the Aspen Institute website under the Community Strategies Group. This report is a 3-part report. What they discovered was that number one, to Kelly's point earlier, was that we need to do a better job with collecting data and what we do with that data in rural America. What does that data, how is that data shared? How are our stories shared in rural media? There's a huge media desert in rural America. So we need to make sure that our news coverage and our media coverage is actually telling the accurate stories of what's going on in rural America so that people understand those issues. And the third piece was a survey that they did that really helps to illuminate what are rural communities working on, how are they collaborating and getting out of their silos, how are they leveraging their mightiness on their own in ways that are going to help us recover from not just COVID related recession, but in general, long term, how are we going to be doing this? So the authors of this particular study are the people that I'm working with on my proposal to actually facilitate the Aspen to Parachute leadership groups, the cohorts. I want to import them into the Roaring Fork Valley to help facilitate with our local elected officials and our local non-elected community leaders to do exactly what you're describing, Sumner. How can we just look at it and hold the space? Nothing like this exists at the Aspen Institute until now. Bob and Soledad Hurst up in Aspen have identified that this is an immediate need and a long-term need. And everyone at the Aspen Institute, all of the senior VPs and executive directors for all of these different program departments that I've been speaking with are very excited that we now have a community that we can work with and download all of the content from all of these amazing wealth of research and program analysis and implementation support the community's Aspen to Parachute. So that is what is about to kind of be underway. All of that proposal process is still in its infancy. Again, I'm only 8 weeks onto the job, but that is what's coming. In addition to a number of other proposals, people have already reached out from other departments. One, for example, around schools, local schools. So Rob, there's an invitation on the table that I'm going to be circling back with you about. There's going to be additional things that we're going to be circling back with Brian, and more of the things that are evolving out of the Voices Unidas group. Additional things that we're going to be circling back with Sydney, and additional things that we're going to be circling back with Mike Lowe at CoVenture and some of the SBDC initiatives that are already underway. In the time remaining, I also want to pivot just slightly the conversation to opportunities that exist with the Roaring Fork leadership. I know, having gone through their program, and this is just a plug for RFL, I ended up taking my career in a different direction as a direct result of RFL. I participated in the program back in 2014. I know that it has evolved some a bit, but I just would love to give anyone else that has had an opportunity to go through the program to say anything about what their experience was, and to turn it back over to Andrea to talk a little bit more about what opportunities exist and how to stay engaged. This is sort of the what are you looking forward to, what do you feel optimistic about moving forward. And I feel really optimistic because of their focus on civic engagement projects. It's an opportunity and a facilitated mechanism. It's a venue for people to get engaged in what these projects are. So Andrea, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks. So yeah, within the RFL Academy, it's a 10-month leadership program. We've been doing it for 31 years, going into our 32nd class, starting in, I think, the end of August this coming year. And applications, we're accepting applications. So I see a lot of alumni on here and know of organizations that have nominated people. So you can certainly nominate somebody to get involved with this process that we have put together and programming. And of course, the civic projects. Another aspect is submitting civic projects to us that have, again, that are going to solve community problems, like that create change that is needed in our community. And we put teams together, and that's what they get to focus on, apply what they learn, and make a difference in the community at the same time. And that's been a founding aspect of what RFL stands for, is to get people involved in the community to solve these problems. So again, we would encourage, if you haven't done it, please consider it or nominate someone for this program. And Evan, a huge thank you for bringing this topic to the discussion. I loved having the group we have and the input that you provided, because we have to have these dialogues so we can know we're going in the right direction, if it validates information or highlights some things that maybe weren't emphasized before. So within the Roaring Fork Leadership's website, we also, on the homepage, you can apply, right? There's a button to apply, and there's also resiliency resources. So we've created a whole page, kind of like what Brian shared with Aspen Community Foundation, a little bit different, but helping people with their well-being. So other free programs, again, these talks, Resiliency Experience, are every Tuesday from noon to 1. And again, we just started it in May. I'm booking people currently into October. Michelle Ewalt, who's on the call here, is an upcoming speaker, September 29th. She's done a lot of work in the leadership arena herself, moved out here from Texas, I think not too long ago. So excited to have her wrapped into what we're offering and for her to contribute her wisdoms along those ways. So again, lots of resources out there. I love how the community is coming together. I know we're right at 1 o'clock, but I will throw in there, if anybody did have kind of sharing that optimism or silver lining on how we're all creating hope and being resilient, it would be great just to end on that note.
Oh.
Does anybody have any questions as we close here? Thank you so much for joining us. You can find me at the Aspen Institute by going online, aspeninstitute.org/HCI. And that'll give you a little bit more information about what's to come through the Hurst Community Initiative. I know that I'll be in touch with a lot of you again. Thanks again. I appreciate your coming out.
Thank you so much.